JFK International Airport, Thursday, July 30th, 1992. Transworld Airlines Flight 843, a Lockheed L-10-11-100, made an emergency landing shortly after takeoff and came to rest at the end of runway 13 right at approximately 1740 Eastern Daylight Time. The flight originated at Terminal B in the TWA Flight Center. A total of 280 passengers and a crew of 12 were boarded for the flight to San Francisco. Every seat on the aircraft was occupied. The aircraft was fueled to 119,000 pounds with a total aircraft gross weight at approximately 428,000 pounds. The flight was cleared to taxi to runway 13 right for takeoff and proceeded with no apparent problems. The weather was clear with a ceiling at 3,500 feet broken, visibility 11 miles, wind 130 at 7 knots. Shortly after the flight became airborne, the crew experienced problems that resulted in the decision to make an emergency landing. Moments later, while the aircraft was still decelerating, the tower radioed 843 heavy, numerous flames, and then reported code 34 to alert and direct the airport emergency equipment to the scene. The JFK emergency plan was immediately put into action. What was so often simulated was now a reality. The aircraft came to a stop as fire raged. The alert and well-trained crew of 843 immediately started the evacuation of all on board. Only minutes later, the emergency equipment arrived on the scene and immediately began their rescue and firefighting procedures. Miraculously, all 292 on board escaped without significant injury, and everyone was collected and moved out of harm's way by the crew and rescuers. The successful evacuation is a tribute to the TWA flight and airport ground personnel that risked life and limb to avoid a catastrophe.
Let's join the crew of Flight 843 as they describe the events of that afternoon. We'll start with Captain Kinkead. Bill, as the aircraft was coming to a stop, what was your major concern?
I'd already been told by the tower that we had had numerous flames. We'd had a fire warning in the number 2 engine, so we knew that we had some pretty serious problems other than just the number 2 engine. So I felt that there was no point in anything other than getting out of the airplane as quickly as possible, and that was my thought at that point, was to order an absolute immediate evacuation. As I was getting out of my seat, I picked up the PA and said, "This is the captain, evacuate the aircraft." I believe I said it twice, but I'm not sure on that. As we came out, I do recall thinking, "Oh, take your hat," because they need that to identify you. So I did remember I reached over and grabbed my hat as we started out. I do recall the first impression that I got as I went through the flight deck door, that you could see the fire, which was a lot worse than I had expected it to be at this point outside. There was a very definite orange glow, and smoke was already going into the first class area. Not much, but enough that you could smell it. And there was noise and confusion that you're bound to get as a result of this. But the impression that I had above that was the noise, the move, get out, jump, all of the commands coming from the crew, which I think was the key to the whole thing, because this was what kept control. This kept absolute control of the situation, that there was always somebody telling the people what to do.
Once we came to a complete stop, I jumped up and grabbed the flashlight by my jump seat and was going to go over to the L4 door because I know I couldn't open the R4 door because there was fire outside. And a woman came up and she wanted to open my door. And so we kind of tussled, and it's true what they say, you do. I had to finally say to her, "Look, we can't get the, you can't get the door open." Excuse me. And so as I was going over to the L4 by the aft lavatories, I saw Joni getting ready to open her door, and I couldn't remember her name. And because I saw smoke coming under the door, and all I could do was scream, "No," but at that point, the door was open. And everyone just kind of froze there and waited for the slide to fall, and it just sat there. It just stood up straight in the air. And all I can remember thinking is, this slide is going to come back into this cabin, and I have no place to go because people were on, in front of me and beside me, and I'm trying to move back. And with the grace of God, the slide just kind of unfolded and curled out, and with that, it took the flames with it, thank God. And then I just remember running back over to the R4 side and yelling to passengers to go forward. And they kept coming back towards me, and I kept thinking, oh, is the whole aircraft on fire? Because at that point, I thought that it was just the back of the aircraft. And I said to myself, well, I'm going to live today, and I'm going to get off this plane. So as I kept saying to everyone, go forward, nobody budged. It was like, I had this eye contact, and they saw me do this. And so I jumped on the top of the passenger seats in the back and started moving forward and turned the flashlight on and said, come forward. And that's when people started following suit. They started coming over the seats and turning around in the aisles and going forward. And it seemed like it took forever to get to number 3 door. When I got to the number 3 door, I still couldn't see anything. I didn't know what was going on. And I heard no flight attendants. The only voice I heard was one of our ex-caps, Karen Lacey, and I heard her saying, move it.
When I looked out my window, I can't say that I remember fire on the right side. I just have this kind of memory of an orange glow. And I just knew instinctively I couldn't go that way. That's all I really knew. It was exactly as she said, too, because then I just screamed, no, go forward. And everybody, they just stared at us. It was like, what's going on? And it wasn't until a long time later that night when we talked about it, that we realized that there was fire at the number 3 door, there was fire on the right side. So it was like people got scared and they just froze and they didn't know what to do. And I had to physically start pushing people in order for them to start moving forward. And I don't remember seeing Paula until later, but I remember seeing all the seat backs down and people were just climbing over the seat backs from the right side to the left side. And I didn't realize until later when I put it together that it was all that orange glow and they wanted to get away from it.
Because I saw the fire in the back, my first thought was to look out the window. As soon as we stopped, I knew we had to evacuate, but I also knew I had to check to make sure there was fire. I had no idea where it was between L2 and L3, and I couldn't see anything out of the viewing window. So I stepped back, and Alita at the same time came over to the door, and we looked at each other, and I think it was just, I don't know if we spoke, I don't know what we did, but we communicated, and the door was opened. Alita was flying out the door, and the next thing I knew, she was flying over the seats next to me, and we were trying to pull people forward because we saw that the ambassador section was totally empty. But people seemed to want to go out the first available exit. They just needed to get out that door, and they jammed up at the number 2 door. We literally had to forcefully pull them away from that exit to get them to move to the first exit.
And I knew at this point that we didn't have any of the doors in the back we could use because of the fire. So I thought, well, I've got to open the door and see if we can go out this way. So I opened the door, and again, that slide stood there and teeter-tottered forever. And finally, it fell out. And I think that's when I got partially pushed out. All I could think of was to hold on from the AER. And I got back into the airplane, but there was such a mass of people at that door that I got in the little corner between the ambassador seats and the door, and then I was pushed back against the ambassador seats. And at this time, the flight attendants from the back were pretty much coming up the aisle with the people, so I crawled over the ambassador seats and continued directing people towards first class.
I ran forward to the R1 door. I saw Terry up there with her hand almost on the T-handle to pull the door open. And I can't remember if the plane had come to a stop yet or not, and I don't know why she was hesitating, but it was all in slow motion. The door opened finally in slow motion. The slide stood there forever. By the time the slide opened, it just took forever. The next thing we did was we evacuated all first-class passengers, yelling commands, come this way, jump and slide, hurry out, fire, quick, just yelling as much as we could. You almost wanted to move people with your voice.